Good. Well, welcome everyone. Please be advised that this afternoon's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. We acknowledge that the Northern Rockies Administration Center is located in the heart of the traditional territory of the Dene, Cree, and Dene Saw people of Fort Nelson, Prophet River First Nations. We further recognize the rights provided by our treaty. We also celebrate the contributions and the enduring presence of the Métis in our region. So if I could get an adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Souls and Roper, any opposed? Motion carries. And so excited for this report today. And we'll just do a really quick introduction around the table. So Lorraine Gerwing, Regional Councillor, and
John Roper, Regional Councillor.
Scott Barry, CAO.
Jaylene McIver, Corporate Manager. Here, you can scream into
okay. Okay, and online we'll start with Mayor Fraser, please.
So Rob Fraser, the new mayor.
Kyle.
And Regional Councillor Kyle Andrews.
And our three guests, I'll leave it up to you to who's going to talk first.
Heidi Redmond, Principal with Lees and Associates.
Thank you.
Patrick Beach, Landscape Designer, Lees and Associates.
And Ivy Smith, the Landscape Designer from Lees and Associates.
Excellent. Thanks so much. We're good. So I will just going to pass it over to our consultants to present the NRM Parks and Trails Active Mobility presentation. So take it away.
Hey, thank you very much. We're going to bring up the presentation on our screen to share with you. Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors, and members of staff. My name is Heidi Redmond with Lees and Associates, landscape architects and planners, and we're delighted to be here this afternoon to present the Parks and Trails Active Mobility Project. Our agenda includes quick introductions, a project overview, and a summary of the site visit findings. Ivy Smith will then walk you through the community engagement process and what we heard. And Patrick will talk a bit about the concept designs and the proposed improvements at Art Fraser and Andy Bailey. Finally, we'll review the cost estimates for each park. And if you have any burning questions during the presentation, please chime in. Otherwise, we'll have lots of time at the end for questions. Next slide. Our study team included myself, landscape architect and principal. Patrick Beach was the project manager, and Ivy Smith provided project support as well as engagement and accessibility expertise. The Parks Trails Active Mobility Plan is a planning document that establishes a roadmap to guide the regional municipality in future improvements at Art Fraser Memorial Park and Andy Bailey Regional Park to improve accessibility, mobility, and community well-being. It will inform future decision-making related to the active mobility planning and will guide priorities and budgeting for future park improvements. There are a couple of key definitions used throughout the document that are worth highlighting in the context of the project. Accessibility, with respect to active mobility planning in this project, it means people, regardless of age, size, ability, or disability are able to access, experience, and use the features and facilities of the parks. Barrier refers to a feature of a site, structure, technology, system, or space that may prevent or limit someone's ability to fully participate in the designed environment. The work presented today is the culmination of 6 months of effort, including background analyses and site visits, a first round of community engagement, compilation of draft concept plans, followed by a second round of community engagement. There was an extensive program of engagement in this project. The results that we heard were incorporated with direction from RM staff into the final concepts and recommendations presented today. Members of our team and regional municipality staff completed site visits at each park to assess current conditions and barriers to accessibility, as well as opportunities for improvement. A snapshot of some of the conditions at Art Fraser include a photo in the top left that shows a disconnection between amenities on the site, for example, a lack of pathways leading to the gazebo. The bottom left shows the current interface between the parking lot and the playground, which has a lack of barrier for children in proximity to vehicles. And photo 3 on the right shows some exploration around the back of the ball diamonds to scout out potential trail opportunities. At Andy Bailey, a photo in the top left shows an unsightly concrete barrier that prevents access to the beach. Photo 2, bottom left, shows existing campsite conditions, which have barriers in prohibiting access for those in wheelchairs. And photo 3 on the right shows the outhouse conditions and some of the inaccessibility of those features. I'll hand it over now to Ivy to talk about community engagement.
Great, thanks, Heidi. So there were 2 rounds of engagement for this project. The first round, held in July, was about getting a sense of how people use the parks, what barriers they encounter, and gathering ideas for accessibility improvements and what they'd like to see in the future. The first round included an online survey, as well as a drop-in community pop-up event held at Art Fraser Park, where we provided display boards, snacks, and were available to answer questions and speak with the public about the project. The second round of engagement, held in September, presented 2 concept options per park and confirmed community priorities. The second round included another online survey and a community pop-up event similar in format to the first round of engagement, which we held at the Street Festival. So for both rounds of engagement, there was First Nations outreach. In June, the project was introduced by the NRRM staff during in-person conversations with representatives from Fort Nelson First Nation and Prophet River First Nation. Follow-up invitations were provided via email to the Fort Nelson First Nation, Prophet River First Nation, and Acho Deneko First Nation, opening the dialogue, introducing the project, and offering some options to provide feedback, which included invitations to the community pop-up events, online survey, and an invitation for additional discussions as needed. In July, a project update was provided to the First Nations via email, inviting continued feedback. And for both rounds of engagement, NRRM staff dropped by the Northern Rockies Aboriginal Women's Society and the Fort Nelson Aboriginal Friendship Society to let people know about the project and drop off and pick up hard copy versions of the surveys. Lines of communication with First Nations were kept open throughout the duration of the project. So this slide shows the presentation numbers for the engagement events. And as you can see, we had some great turnout for the event held at the Street Festival, which was the second community pop-up event. We felt like the community pop-up events were a really successful part of this project and an effective way of engaging the community and even capturing some people that wouldn't normally engage in projects like this. And we found that hosting engagement engagement events at or near the location of the project was particularly impactful, as people could look around the park and make comments directly. And we even noticed some counselors that showed up to some of the pop-ups, so that was nice to see as well. So jumping into what we heard, here are a few quotes from the online surveys related to Art Fraser Park. So some of the main comments we received were with regards to including more shade throughout the park, providing winter maintained trails, updating the playground equipment and surfacing. And some key takeaways from the engagement for Art Fraser Park included improving the playground area and spray park. People wanted more shade throughout the park, accessible play equipment and surfacing, an area for teens and youth, an improvement for the interface between the parking lot and playground. We also heard about improving circulation and trails throughout the park. People would like to see more walking opportunities with posted distances, winter maintained trails, and accessible trails as well. Improving the picnic area. The existing picnic shelter was a very popular place, as we noticed when we were there, and there was a desire for an additional picnic shelter with potentially accessible furniture. So here are a few quotes from the surveys related to Andy Bailey Park. People clearly enjoyed camping at Andy Bailey, as we received many comments requesting more camping spots and more variety of campsite types, including group campsites. And the existing sand at the beach is overgrown with vegetation, and we received lots of comments with a desire for a sandier beach. There was also concern about vandalism of park amenities, as well as a desire for a formalized parking, including at the boat launch. So some of the main themes that we heard about during the community engagement for Andy Bailey Park included improving the beach area, providing an accessible water entry point, accessible dock and boat launch, shade at the beach, and particularly shelter from bugs. Bugs was one of the main issues and barriers that we heard about during the community engagement at Andy Bailey Park. Improving washrooms. There's currently no accessible toilet at Andy Bailey, so there was a desire to have one there. Improving camping areas. Again, there's a desire for more variety of sizes and amount of camping spaces to choose from. And then there was also interest in improving the overall circulation between amenities within the park. So between the campsites, outhouses, parking areas, and the beach. So now I'll hand it over to Patrick to review the concepts.
Thanks, Ivy. Yeah, so now we can move on to the concept plans for each park, starting with Art Fraser, where we have improvements to accessibility, park amenities, and circulation. I'll point out a couple of the highlights, starting with phase 1. So as we heard from Ivy, we heard a lot from folks about the need for more shade in this park. To address this, we are proposing an additional pergola with picnic tables located next to the campground. You can see the cursor there. A shade structure located next to the spray park, as well as new trees throughout the park. Based on feedback from park users and our site assessment, we also have a number of proposed improvements aimed directly at accessibility, including accessible picnic tables that meet CSA standards for clear space and are resistant to vandalism, wider entrances to the basketball and tennis courts, pathway extensions to the seating areas, and wheelchair cutouts in the baseball bleachers. To improve circulation and provide more activities, especially for seniors, we are proposing a looping path system with options for both short loops around the northern areas of the park and longer loops around the baseball diamonds. To improve safety and address concerns we heard from parents of young children, we are proposing a raised speed table style crosswalk connecting the picnic area and baseball diamonds, and a barrier between the playground and the parking lot along the north edge of the playground, or north edge of the parking lot, pardon me. Phase 2 improvements include the relocation of the northmost parking stalls down to the southwest corner of the site to allow for expanded green space and additional play equipment, as well as additional amenities such as a pergola seating area with plantings. On the next slide, we have a couple of before and after images of the improvements. The top images show one potential option for a barrier between the playground and parking lot that includes planting, benches, and large boulders. The bottom images show the installation of the looping pathway and new trees south of the baseball diamonds. This slide shows images of some of the proposed improvements, including accessible play equipment options, such as sensory play equipment, as requested by parents, aimed at developing cognitive and communication skills. We are also showing examples of accessible seating and shade structures. So moving on to Andy Bailey, which features accessibility improvements and improved amenities. Phase 1 improvements include key accessibility upgrades, such as campsite retrofits to remove barriers, accessible picnic tables throughout the park, a beach mat to help people using wheelchairs and other folks that require firmer surface to use the beach, and the establishment of accessible parking stalls next to the beach. Phase 1 also includes the installation of a screened-in bug shelter at the beach, which was one of the most requested features from residents, as well as the replacement of the existing outhouse near the beach with an accessible outhouse and a change room, another highly requested improvement to the park. In Phase 2, we see the installation of an accessible dock, nature play equipment, new walking campsites along the lake, and retrofits to existing campsites along the driveway to better accommodate modern RVs, provide options for group camping, and further improve accessibility. This slide shows before-after images of some of the proposed improvements. On the top, we see the removal of barriers and the installation of accessible picnic tables at Campsite 1. The lower images show the establishment of accessible parking stalls at the beach, including signage, regrading, and a wider chicane-style entrance that is easier to get through with a stroller or wagon than the current barriers, but still prohibits off-road vehicles from accessing the beach. And this slide shows images of some of the proposed improvements, including a beach mat, top left, which allows folks using a beach chair in the top right image to access the water. We're also showing an accessible dock with a personal watercraft launch, nature play features, and options for an accessible outhouse, change room, and bug shelter.
Okay. Finally, cost estimates are presented at the end of the report. This includes Class D capital costs supported by detailed cost breakdowns for each of the recommendations that Patrick has just outlined. Costs assume construction by contractors through a design tender build process. However, some items could be completed in-house through staff resources. The cost estimates are opinions of probable cost based on the final concept plans, with unit costs based on recent tender returns, our professional experience, and quotes from suppliers. Next slide. The costing includes design and engineering fees as well as contingency. Recommendations are broken into Phase 1 and Phase 2 to focus on implementation of key priorities that will have the most meaningful impact in the short term. Some of the key improvements for Phase 1 at Art Fraser include accessible surfacing and equipment for the playground, connected looping accessible trails through the park, a new picnic shelter and a straight new shade structure over the spray park, as well as additional tree planting. And the key improvements for phase 2 include converting the north parking area to additional park space and additional park amenities such as seating areas and a mini pump track. For Andy Bailey, key improvements in phase 1 include new accessible outhouses and a changing structure, converting at least 2 of the campsites to be fully accessible, a new bug shelter, accessible pathways, and beach access improvements such as the beach mat. Key improvements for phase 2 include a new nature play area, new storage shelter, new campsites, and converting remaining campsites and outhouses to be accessible, and accessible dock. Next slide. In conclusion, we hope that these plans will assist the regional municipality in making incremental changes to reduce barriers and increase accessibility at the parks. Art Fraser Memorial Park and Andy Bailey are both currently listed on the Access BC website as not accessible due to their lack of accessible features. These recommendations, based on community input, can help put the parks back onto the accessibility map for both residents and visitors to the region. By improving the parks for accessibility, the sites will be improved for the community as a whole. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I also see that we have an admin report coming, so I don't know if we want to see if there's any questions specific to the consultants and then move on to the admin report. Okay, we'll do that. So, Councillor Andrews, do you have any comments, questions?
Just one slight concern with the north parking at Art Fraser. I know the parking's congested as it is. And then just to make a long corridor where if it was full and somebody went to pull in, trying to come out, I'm sure there's ways around it, but that was kind of the only thing that jumped out at me.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Fraser?
Thanks very much for the presentation. It's obvious that a lot of work went into the work that you did and the report that you've made. I haven't had a chance to read it. I have just recently looked at it, so I think I'll probably reserve most of my comments. But I do have a question about the First Nations input. Was there, although you reached out, you had quite a list of opportunities where you reached out. Was there feedback with respect to any potential design characteristics that they'd like to see that might reflect some of the heritage or cultural values that they might have at the nation?
And we did have some feedback through the surveys, which was anonymous, so I'm not sure if anything showed up in there. But we also had some folks come out to the pop-up events, and which Ivy and Patrick attended.
I can speak to that as well. It's Hillary here. Just in the conversations that we had in person at Prophet River First Nation and Fort Nelson First Nation, there was some just informal dialogue about maybe opportunities to incorporate some Indigenous history into maybe the names or into signage that might be established at the park. But yeah, there was some comments about naming of areas and how could we work together, more general comments related to tourism and promoting the cultural awareness.
Is there more opportunity, Hillary, at moving forward to do continued engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. We've continued to support any conversation about this project or others, just maintaining that the conversation remains open whenever there is feedback or time for staff, council, leadership at any of the Indigenous communities to provide comment.
If I may add too, I think it's going to be really exciting when we get concept drawings that we can go out again into, well, all of our communities, right? And once we have like a picture on the paper, then that will provide a lot more opportunities for people to share their perspectives on the plan. So are you good, Mayor?
Yeah, that was
Fraser?
my initial, those were my initial thoughts and questions. I might have some more after I finish reading the report.
Okay, thanks. Councilor Roper?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for such a great report. I really appreciate the fact that you went to the park itself to gain some of that feedback. Those are the you want to be close to the people who use it the most. And I think you guys did a great job of getting some great feedback. I'm really encouraged by the ideas that are in the report. And just to further Mayor Fraser's comments, I think there's possibly some other enhancements we could do, possibly in conjunction with the accessibility piece that could really highlight the region's culture and add a little bit more zest to the parks themselves. So thank you very much.
Great. Councilor Souls?
I really appreciate the trails that come along with the Art Fraser Park. That idea, I know for a fact that they would be used if they were there, and they are used even though they aren't there. So we can call them walking trails, and that's fine. But the ones out at Andy Bailey, I assure you, they'll all be running trails because you'll be running to get to that screened-in bug. And so make them so they have good traction for running. And the last thing is that I know where you can get a whole bunch of big rocks if you need them for various things.
Great. Okay. Something that I was surprised at that there was no mention was heating the water at the spray park. So I'm surprised that I mean, I haven't gone all the way through the public feedback here, but that would be something that I would make note of if there is funding somewhere available. If there's somehow we could get that water heated, it would make for even a greater use for sure. Yeah. Okay, staff, do you have anything? Anybody has any questions? No?
I had one more after your comments, if I could.
Yep.
Was there anything in the scope of work that talked about, I mean, you guys are in this business all the time, that talked about identifying potential funding sources? Was that part of the scope of work or not? Or is that just something that you guys can do for us?
I think we will address some of that in the admin report. Yep.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So if there's nothing else from the consultants, you're free to stay or go or whatever. Like we're going to move on to the admin report then. Yes, so I'll give it to Sean.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Following the presentation from Lee's, the admin report before you is intended to spark discussion on the projects identified within the summary report. As noted, Regional Council passed a resolution to enter into an agreement with the Government of Canada to fund the NRM Parks and Trails Active Mobility Study. The NRM undertook the study in 2022 to capture and reflect the community's vision, needs, and priorities in relation to accessibility improvements at both parks, which were identified as a priority. With the study and conceptual design complete, the next step will be to undertake a detailed design. Council should see a reflective request of detailed design costs within the 2023 recreation budget in the absence of any other funding this year. Staff has submitted an expression of interest to the BC Destination and Development Fund as well. We're hoping that will result in an invitation to apply. To that end, as mentioned in the admin report, the requirement for shovel-ready projects for grant availability plays a large role. And so staff also understands that today's meeting has brought forward a lot of information. So the intent today is to open discussions, not to request any decisions, unless mayor and council feel that they're ready to make some decisions at their own discretion. Thank you.
Any questions about admin report? Mayor Fraser?
Yeah, so I want to talk about the funding, obviously, and potential opportunities for funding because they haven't been around. You said, Sean, in your report that we've engaged and partnered with the feds on this portion, doing a study and identifying the basic need. But what are the opportunities for? Well, I guess you did mention one there. Is that for construction and completion, or is it for initial design? Because there's the Class D estimated there's a substantial amount of money there that we're talking about 15% of the whole project, 80,000, 160 when you look at both phases. So I'm just wondering if there's any opportunities for funding help with the design.
No, absolutely, Mayor. The Destination Development Fund, I'll let Hillary speak to it a little further, but it has the availability of $1 million with 15% that can go towards planning. So that would be 15% of the offset, 15% of the consultant fees. But let's Hillary speak to it more. She did the expression of interest, so she has more information on it herself.
Hi, Mayor Fraser and Council. Yeah, so just going back to the beginning of the study too, the project was initially undertaken with budget requested through REC last year. And it wasn't until we started the project that grant funding we found out about and then subsequently applied for. So that was a great enhancement to the project, getting the funding from the Government of Canada. The next one, it came up quickly, the BC Destination Development Fund, with a December 6th or 7th deadline to apply. So based on our conversations with North BC Tourism, and there was some eligible projects identified. One was campground enhancements. We chose to put in an expression of interest for the upgrades, the full project cost for Andy Bailey. That fund, the available funding is up to $1 million, fully covered. So we put in a request for the full project costs of phase 1 and phase 2 for Andy Bailey, which in those budgets includes the Class D estimate for detailed design. So that project would be fully covered. Detailed design, well, the planning piece is up to 15%. So hoping that would be fully covered if we were successful in getting at least to the next stage, which would be that invitation to apply for a full grant.
Okay, so is that contingent on having a shelf-ready project? Because I heard that earlier on in the statement as well, that getting these grants to some degree is dependent on being shovel-ready, and I'm just wondering. Well, I don't think we're there yet. We've got a concept, but so it comes to this year's budget, right? Are we budgeting for the entire project, our share of it, or are we budgeting for a shovel-ready project, or are we waiting to proceed until we know we get a response back from the expression of interest?
So that's part of the discussion, hopefully today, Mr. Mayor, that we can get through is staff just wants to figure out which direction Mayor and Council would like to go. Would you like us to proceed with putting out an RFQ for detailed design for a phase of the project, the entire project, both parks, one park? Those are some of the questions that we need to get some answers to prior to moving forward. But again, we're not asking for answers to those questions today, just a discussion. Staff also has an intention to, depending on which direction you guys want to proceed, to post for an RFQ for the project as well. And within that, we could ask for assistance in searching for grants applicable to the construction and the design as well, for assistance on that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Barry.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So at this stage, obviously the presentation was intended for council to be able to absorb that information, take a look at it, provide any dialogue likes to occur to ask the questions. At the end of the day, the project is not shovel ready, right? So I'll just want to make sure that's clear, because it's at a conceptual design as the mayor had mentioned also, and it's part of the discussion.
in my experience, when it comes to these types of projects, I mean, we're always looking for grant opportunities. So between, Lee's as a current consultant and our other consultants that we have, and internally in our own processes, we're always scanning the horizon for opportunities. It's my experience that detailed design, you can get to conceptual design, and you can get projects that or grants that typically provide funding to whatever extent as part of the project, but in many cases, very seldom, not that they're not out there, but there's not a whole lot that usually capture the detailed design piece. In a lot of cases, this particular one, I think, covers around 15% if successful. That said, it's a bit of the chicken and egg syndrome, right? So in regards to this one here, and again, my experience, typically when you're looking for that type of funding, and many times that funding becomes oversubscribed, is they usually a lot of times pick the projects that are shelf ready, meaning that detailed design is complete and it's sitting there because that's shovel ready. Your detailed design is complete. So in terms of due process at this point, we're not sitting there asking council to approve anything specific to detailed design, because that's part of the 2023 budget process. So as John mentioned, that there is a budget item on there broken out based on the phases for council for detailed design costs, if council wish to proceed in 23 for that. And in the meantime, we'll continue to look for opportunities to cover those costs through some kind of grant mechanism. And of course, the process right now, the opportunity that's we're currently looking at is the expression of interest, as Hillary said, has been submitted. And the process for that is to basically be invited to I said with the group the other day, we might get invited to the party essentially. So it's an invitation to apply at that point. It would be the next step, which we're not even at yet. So that's basically the process. We met with REC a couple of days ago, reviewed the budget piece as part of the 23 budget, and there's an item on there requesting council's approval for a detailed design piece for that. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Fraser, are you good? Do you have any follow-up or?
Oh, I got a million questions going through my mind. I'm sorry, I just probably suck up a whole lot of the time here. With respect, did we do any now, because I haven't read the report, did we do any work with respect to numbers of use? I mean, my experience with some of the parks that we had in Taylor, obviously Peace Island Park, which is very close to the community and is similar, only it's the river as opposed to a lake. Extensive use from but it took us a lot to get into that, and the numbers that we find using the playground facilities, particularly the ones that we put in that were accessible with the rubber surface that allowed accessibility, we saw a huge uptake in the amount of users that were using it, both from ambulatory and non-ambulatory people. We saw people from Fort St. John, Dawson Creek starting to use our parks because they could bring their kids and all of their kids. And so I'm just wondering if we've got any numbers with respect to usage of those two parks, because I think if we're going to do this in a phased approach, I think numbers will play a part.
So this is like details in the report. Did we want to get into that now, or is this a question that we want to put in the parking lot to deal with when we have more time? Unless somebody has that information right at their fingertips.
No, we don't have numbers.
Okay.
For our Fraser.
Okay, so if we'll make note of that, Mayor Fraser, and we'll put that in the parking lot, and I'm sure there'll be more questions. Councillor Souls, please.
I think that given the fact that these two parks being identified as non-accessible, I think it's actually the tip of the iceberg. This is the front edge of our look. Art Fraser is our most used park by far, and it's obvious that it's a good starting point. I think that the fact that like getting to design as soon as we can on these two, it's a relatively small step to have shovel ready projects, and that gets us started. I actually just think that this is the start, because I can think of other parks and other things that we use. And, and for those of us who've lived here for a very long time, we actually know, we all know that there is actually a shortage of local places to go, local places to camp. And the more that we start building in that direction, the sooner we will realize that it's wise to start building right from the start with accessibility. So it makes, I think it's a good idea to head there fairly soon.
Great point. That was going to be my contribution as well. Not being listed on Accessibility BC really hampers some of our tourism engagement opportunities that we are spending time, money, resources on as well. So I see it at working in tandem. Councillor Andrews, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just more looking at the design. I have some more design questions I'd like to have answered. And just looking more into it is probably something we should consider is finishing the parking at the rec center, because lots of overflow could go over that way as well.
Yeah, good point. Councillor Roper, did you have anything more to add?
Just had one more question. When we're doing a request for quotes, do we typically incur costs during that process, or do the quotes come in at no cost to the municipality?
The quotes generally come in at no cost to the municipality. The only cost incurred will be posting the actual RFQ, which is minimal. Usually just goes on our bids and tenders site.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm understanding what the expectation of today's meeting is. It was my understanding that we weren't coming to any decisions today, but I think I heard where staff was looking for some input into how to proceed. Was it for grant funding, or I'm just lost track of that detail?
So no specific input required, because right now the expression of interest is in. We're always looking for grant opportunities, so we don't need council's decision or direction to do that. If anything, it's to continue. I mean, we need to bring this back to council. I think there's still some work to be done from a council needs an opportunity to take a look at it, and we have to bring that back to council to have further discussion. Like, this is the first time you've seen it and been introduced to it. So the intent today was to take a look at it, start getting feedback, because eventually, obviously, we're right to the point where we want council to endorse a plan. Because as much as we do have a detailed design cost, we don't want to go to detailed design until council is comfortable with the conceptual design, so that we can proceed in the detailed design, because that's when the funds are typically spent, if it's internal or grant, to get to that detailed design, which makes it shovel ready. So there's still more discussion required with council. And so what I would ask is, take a good look at it, chew on it, and we'll bring it back to council again for more discussion at a future, most likely committee of the whole meeting, so that we can get more feedback as part of that piece, so we can start firming up what that concept looks like with our consultants, and then hopefully get to a point where there's an agreement on that piece, so that if we do proceed with a detailed design, we have that piece looked after behind us, being the concept piece.
Okay, and then that next meeting will take place before budget deliberations?
That would be the intent. I mean, at the end of the day, the budget for the detailed design versus proceeding with detailed design can be two different things, right?
Yeah.
When you're approving the budget, it would be no sense, in my opinion, to proceed with it until we get the conceptual piece looked after with council.
Yep.
Even if the budget is approved to proceed, it doesn't mean that's just in principle. It doesn't mean that we need to actually proceed with it. It means that when council agrees on the conceptual design, we have the ability to proceed with the funds that are budgeted for. So
Okay,
from a timing perspective, we'll figure that out.
So in the meantime, then, as council goes through the plan on their own, if they have questions or concerns, they don't have to wait for the next meeting. They can send those questions and concerns to you, and you would get the
You
appropriate.
can send them to me, or even just, I think it's fine to send them directly through to Hillary and
Okay.
Sean, and then that could be with the group. I'll share them with the group at this point. And we'll discuss internally if we want to change the approach a bit. But I mean, at this point, because we can collect that information and provide that back as part of that meeting.
And I think it would be, if any council members decides to do that, I think it would be really great to loop in council as a whole. just so that we're all thinking about the points that individual council people are bringing up as they're going through the report. I have to say that I very much heard the community voice in this report, and I'm also understanding that I have been immersed in the project from probably inception. So I'm fully aware that I'm bringing that to the table as well, and not everybody has been. But I just really want to highlight for staff and our consultants just how pleased I am that we didn't sit back and have a engagement session at the community hall. They were at the, just out and about and in all of the different places. And I heard from the community how much they appreciated that. And I very much feel that that is truly represented in this report. Heard the community voice loud and clear. So congratulate everybody involved in that. So anything else? Does anybody have anything to add? Then I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you.